BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. All right, and today we are revisiting our discussions on the disappearance of Maura Murray, who disappeared February 9th, 2004, after crashing her car in Haverhill, New Hampshire. And we were talking about Maura Murray yesterday on the channel, and once again, giving a shout out to YouTube user Postmark, who asked the question, Maura Murray, do you have any out of the black box ideas to share? Any theories that haven't gotten enough attention? Thank you to Postmark for suggesting this topic, and I have to say, I've been going down somewhat of a rabbit hole once again with the Maura Murray case the way that we do. I think many people who get involved with true crime really get fixated on the Maura Murray case because we know so much about Maura Murray's life prior to that quote-unquote car crash, if you want to call it that. I mean, because as we'll see through the discussion today, there are a few different steps that are involved. But I think it's because we know so much about what happened prior to February 9th of 2004 about Maura's life and absolutely nothing afterward. So then it just really allows people to theorize and formulate hypotheses and such. We could do a different Maura Murray theory every single day. But the problem with that is that would almost become like trying to force creativity onto the situation, as opposed to actually trying to get to the truth. Like when we have some of our Zodiac Killer discussions here on the channel, like I've said, a few of these Zodiac Killer theories could be very good plots for a novel, but the fact of the matter is these aren't just stories. We're talking about a real case, real people, and Maura Murray, of course, as a real person. I mean, it's the same with some of the theories in the Maura Murray case. Some of them would make excellent novels, except for the fact that people are really trying to get the truth. And as far as outside of the black box theories, though, I think that in this one, we're going to be looking at a few different ones. Like I said, instead of just doing like a different Maura Murray episode every single day of the week, I would really just like to talk about a couple ones. And I thought about doing an entire upload on an individual named Cecil Smith. After Maura Murray, of course, had the alleged car crash, Cecil Smith was supposedly on the scene at 7:46 p.m. that night, February 9th, 2004. He is referred to frequently as the first officer on the scene. And also, Cecil Smith was an individual who allegedly knew Butch Atwood, the last person to see Maura Murray alive. Butch Atwood was the school bus driver who was coming by in his bus, and if I recall, he had just dropped some students off after a ski trip, like a field trip. He had just been coming back from taking students from a ski trip. So that's why that's why the school bus was on the road at that hour at night, and he saw Maura Murray outside of her car. He said she didn't appear to be injured, and he asked her if she needed assistance. She said no, she had called AAA. He knew that wasn't true because they didn't have any cell service in the area. So then he drove home. He told his wife about it. She made the call. Bush went back into the bus to fill out a report and do some paperwork. And then whatever happened after that, well, that's the mystery, and that's what's going on. A lot of people believe that Maura Murray got into somebody else's car because the search dogs lost her scent about 100 yards from the crash site. Okay, though, not to be too repetitive, I'm sure you've heard all of these facts before if you found your way to this far off corner of YouTube. I mean, so one of the other things that we can say about this is, I was listening to 107 Degrees, and they brought an individual named Guy Parody onto the show, and he was the first person who shared something very valuable when he was saying that if you look at the damage to the front of Maura's car, the black Saturn that you see here, what he was saying is, number one, this did not hit a tree, and I think that is very well accepted now. John Smith, the famous Maura Murray investigator, he was pushing that so hard. He even got very confrontational with somebody once, but he was really trying to force, well, what he believes to be the truth, which I believe to be the truth. I mean, that Maura Murray's car did not hit a tree. He was arguing with one of the witnesses who said he heard the car accelerate when it hit the tree. He's like, that's impossible. Maura Murray couldn't have done that. Because if the car had hit a tree, according to Smith and Guy Parody, you would see a circular, half-circle, half-moon-shaped dent in the car. And also, the thing that Guy Parody really contributed was going a step further and saying not only is there not this type of indentation that would have happened when the car would have collided with a tree, this type of damage also does not come from a snowbank. This comes from a vehicle that was slightly larger than the Saturn. Like, this would happen if a car was going in reverse, and we shouldn't say a car really, because you would have to think that it's a van, like a truck, maybe a pickup that is higher off the ground, that is going in reverse and is pressing against Maura Murray's car. And when I was listening to this interview with Guy Parody, he was saying that he believed that earlier on in the day, on February 9th of 2004, Maura Murray must have been in another accident. And one of the other things that was mentioned on 107 Degrees, big shout out to Ethan and Aaron, one of the things that they shared was Maura Murray had a bottle of alcohol that was missing from her car. There are just going to be conflicting reports about what was found on what receipt, and you might hear that she had Bailey's Irish Cream on one receipt, and another one simply says that she had a six-pack of wine coolers, a box of Franzia wine, and the bottle of Kahlua, which was not found in the car. And they brought up the fact that there is this law in New Hampshire where you cannot transport a certain amount of alcohol over state lines, and Maura's items, no matter which receipt it would be, would have exceeded that. So perhaps someone confiscated the alcohol. She had been stopped by the police. How could all of this possibly come together? Well, here's how. What did we say about a vehicle that is larger than the Saturn driving in reverse, or possibly Maura Murray was driving at a slow speed? A school bus. What are we talking about? Butch Atwood. Possible connection to Cecil Smith, who's in law enforcement. And I say possible connection because a lot of people they don't seem to corroborate this, but on Jason Hebert's channel, he did some investigating, and it really appears that not only did Butch Atwood know Cecil Smith, but he was a friend of him. Like, he was rather friendly with him, like they had frequent interactions together. So, I mean, you want to talk about far out theories outside of the box, right? Maura Murray is perhaps driving her car through New Hampshire, going at a very slow speed, and she is not paying attention for a second. Maybe she's hitting the brakes, and she doesn't stop in time behind a school bus, driven by whom? Butch Atwood, and the car collides with the school bus, enough to cause the damage. So then, what happens? Maura Murray and Butch Atwood have a small conversation. Butch Atwood says, hey, look, don't worry about it. The bus isn't damaged. I'm sorry about your car, though. We will have to fill out a report because you rear-ended me. Butch says, like, he knows people at the police department. There won't be any trouble, but they do have to fill out the report. After the officer arrives, and it really doesn't matter which officer was involved. That's why I couldn't do this on the Cecil Smith theory. I think this is even too far out for that. An officer arrives, and that person does something to Maura. And what they tell Butch Atwood is, just go back inside, tell your wife that you saw the girl out by the car tell her you saw her and she said this thing about calling AAA, but you knew that wasn't true. That's just what you're going to say. And Butch is like, well, fine, whatever. He doesn't really know everything that's going to be happening in place, because a lot of people point to Butch Atwood and they say his story seems fishy. He did fail one polygraph test. And one of the things that I was reading about on a forum last night was Butch Atwood took 2 polygraph tests. So says the forum world. I mean, how reliable are these things? One of them he failed, but one of them he passed. And I would say, though, a lot of people are looking at Butch Atwood as a suspect. And I think that we can say one more theory about it, but I would really just like to reach the conclusion and kind of have some type of synopsis. Maura Murray's car collided with the underside of Butch Atwood's school bus. Then an officer comes on the scene, and that officer abducts Maura Murray and takes her somewhere. What would be a counterpiece to that? And you will see variants of this theory posted on the internet. It's not my own original creation. It's just that I've added in a few more connecting elements, if you will. I would say that the damage on Maura's car looks relatively close for a school bus. I mean, I could accept what Guy Parody was saying, a truck, perhaps even like a pickup that is not a lowrider, and that was driving in reverse and that connected with her car. I could even accept the entire premise that a police officer came over to sort the situation out, confiscated Maura's alcohol, saying that she's going to get like some fines. Maura perhaps even has some type of emotional reaction to that. And then the officer perhaps does something to Maura later on, and then they just somebody even dumps her car in the snowbank. I mean, we're just talking about some theories right now. One of the other, but I really don't think that is the most plausible thing. in terms of Butch Atwood as a suspect, one of the theories that I was reading about was, what about if Maura Murray was unconscious? What if, forget this whole thing about the car colliding with the bus at a different location and then they went down the road to try and sort this out? What if this was something different? What if Maura Murray genuinely crashed her car into the snowbank and she was disoriented? The airbag went off and the car was pressed against the snowbank. And some people were asking the question, how could she open the car door if it was pressed against the snowbank on that side, if the snowbank was 2.5 feet tall? And the airbag had deployed? I'd say that it's possible. I've never been in a car crash just like that, but I would not think that that would be impossible to open the car door pressed against the snow. And I mean, it would really depend on how densely packed the snow is. And then Maura Murray comes out in her disoriented state and she collapses. Butch Atwood is driving the bus. He sees an unconscious, 5'7", 21-year-old female in the road or on the side of the road. And he goes out, and his first reaction is just to scoop her up, put her on the bus, drive her to his home, and then him and his wife help her inside. And before they even make the phone call, Maura begins to regain consciousness. She freaks out because she doesn't realize where she is and what's going on, and some incident happened, some accident happened that led to Maura Murray's death. And one of the questions that people are always asking on these forums is, did the search dogs ever get to Butch Atwood's bus? And I believe the answer to that was no. They went through the surrounding areas. They even went to, was it the A-frame house, the one where the blood dogs went quote-unquote bonkers? Little hazy on that detail, but I don't believe that the search dogs ever went into Butch Atwood's bus. But I'd like to talk about that one. Well, one of the big questions with that would simply be, how and when did they dispose of her remains? They would have had numerous opportunities, I'm sure. I would say, though, that if you're going to look at Butch Atwood as a perpetrator in this one, as an active participant, as opposed to simply just somebody who is spreading some disinfo, like one of the people in law enforcement tells Butch Atwood, hey, this is what you're going to say. Please don't ask any questions. Never question us about this. You're just going to say this. I could comprehend that much more so than Butch Atwood doing anything to overpower Maura Murray. If you're going to be listening to anybody online who's going to be talking about all of these Butch Atwood theories, as I understand it, he was over 300 pounds. I mean, they describe him as morbidly obese, and he had a heart condition. I could never imagine Butch Atwood ever overtaking Maura Murray with force. I mean, she was 21 years old. She was a track star. She was a cross-country runner. She was in excellent shape. I mean, we're not talking about fighting somebody off, but we're talking about being agile enough to get away from a perpetrator like Butch Atwood. I do not believe that he would have ever have been a participant in this. In terms of overpowering Maura, I mean, it's like, this is what I said, though, when I was like, some of these theories might make for an interesting novel or a discussion, but where's the proof of any of that Butch Atwood had any criminal involvement with this? The real suspicion falls on him for being the last person to see Maura alive. And I would just like to ask the first challenge question right now, based on some of the theories that we talked about. Do you think that there's any possibility that the damage on Maura Murray's car was caused from hitting Butch Atwood's school bus at a different location? And he's like, just drive up on the road near my home. There's something that we need to do. We need to sort this out. And then some type of foul play met with Maura Murray later on. Do you think that there's any possible, even an iota of possibility, that Maura Murray got into a previous accident prior to that incident? I mean, I'm not saying that I know everything 100%. I would say that it is just a little bit unlikely with the first one. In the second one, I mean, for some reason, I just have this gut feeling that it is a little bit more plausible. But at still, at the same time, the question is just, where is the proof? Think about all the other possibilities. It could have been that Maura got into a genuine car crash, and it's a very simple explanation. She turned down help from Butch Atwood because she wanted to walk down the road and think about what she's going to do next, and somebody offered her a ride. She got into the car, and that person turned out to do something very bad to her. Right now, I would like to give a shout-out to YouTube user David, who left a comment on our most recent Maura Murray upload, the All Is One theory, and we are going to just read that off right here. I only look to research that I conducted from whatever was available and stated most commonly. That includes witness statements and a developed timeline. The first receipt, that's what we talked about earlier, buying the stuff, the ATM video. Yes, Maura Murray was seen on an ATM video. And the alleged cell phone at 4:37 has an oddity to report, by the way. And is that a cell phone call or is that the ping? I think that's the ping. The three main cell phone tower receivers in the area of Haverhill. And lastly, the pictures of the damage on Maura Murray's car, which you see here, as compared to the alleged statements and accident drawing. Based upon all of that, my conclusion is that if it was on the day alleged that she was in the area around 6 p.m., over an hour prior to the time alleged for the accident, during the effort of certain locals, and a cover-up discrepancies occurred that were just large enough to cause suspicion, but debatable enough to cast doubt upon the suspicion. Okay, let's think about that right there, just for a second, what David has written. I mean, to add a little bit of clarity to that situation. If they're saying that there's a 1 hour discrepancy in the Maura Murray timeline, well, what do you think about that? Maura Murray getting into a small car accident, perhaps with Butch Atwood's bus, or perhaps with a vehicle that was very nearby to Butch Atwood's bus, and they said, just drive on up the road and wait for a second, the police will be here soon, and that's what caused the damage on Maura Murray's car. Bear in mind that Maura Murray's car was not disabled, because Fred Murray started it up when it was in the garage. The rag was in the tailpipe, but that almost is definitely put there because Maura Murray didn't want smoke to pour out of the exhaust pipe. But now, this is one thing that I've been meaning to talk about. I mean, I probably shouldn't even say this online because it's something that I've forgotten. On 107 Degrees, they purchased the auto manual for Maura Murray's black Saturn, or the Saturns that she would have been driving. And this is why I said I shouldn't say this. Now, if I understood what they said, is that what happened was Maura Murray was turning the key like back and forth, and that wasn't starting the car. So she thought the car was inoperable. She thought the car wasn't suitable to be driven, or she thought there was something wrong with it. But in reality, what she needed to do was pull the key out and then put it in, and the Saturn would have started. But I really don't remember their exact explanation for that. I probably shouldn't have even have said that. Excuse me. I mean, you can't quote me on that. But, I mean, the point is, Fred Murray did start up the Saturn later on when it was moved to a garage and after the items had been examined by the police. That one is a little bit more frequently discussed. And right now, the last thing that I would like to do is go over to the most reliable true crime website in the world, known as Reddit, and giving a shout out to Reddit user Jason32M. And what he says is, I just wanted to read off this post because I thought it was somewhat insightful. I don't know if Butch Atwood had anything to do with this case, but his actions may be the key to help solving it. As I said, he doesn't have to be the perpetrator. I mean, he could have just been an almost unknowing participant in covering something up, if indeed it did happen that way. During the missing minutes between 7:27 and 7:47, I believe that Maura Murray is either with Butch Atwood, either in the bus or in his alleged outbuilding. Reason being that out of all the witness accounts, Butch is the only one to have a personal interaction with Maura Murray during that time frame. As we said, Butch Atwood is the last person to have seen her live. Nobody else states that they saw her on that night, right? Not even Mrs. Atwood. Well, Mrs. Atwood says very clearly, we're talking about Barbara Atwood, she says that she did not see her. But I believe, as we said, another gentleman heard that he heard the car crash. Well, that would mean that he wouldn't have seen Maura. Okay, I confirm that. Butch had to have at least offered help, knowing that she wanted to be hidden when the police came. Why, though? It's possible Maura wasn't even drinking. This could also explain why a second 911 call isn't placed until after Cecil arrives on the scene. Is it possible that when Mrs. Atwood is on the phone with her 911 call, Butch is on the bus with Maura until the cops arrive? Well, hiding a person on a school bus is almost ridiculous. I mean, all the windows, I mean, goodness gracious. And furthermore, what's the motive? Did Butch take Maura up to the A-frame house during his search in the Mountain Lakes area? I don't know about that. Has it ever been considered that maybe the reason he parked his bus in a different way this one time is to hide any evidence that Maura's car may have come in contact with the back of the bus? You will find this theory all over the place, especially after I heard Guy Parody talking about it. Is the damage to her car consistent with the type of accident, to that type of accident, colliding with the back of a vehicle as opposed to hitting a snowbank or a pine tree? I'm almost certain it didn't hit the pine tree. I mean, as we said, John Smith has talked about this so frequently. The accident reconstructionists have gone through this, and it did not hit the tree. Maybe I'm way off, but something tells me he had to know more than he wasn't telling. All right, so when we look at it that way, I mean, that is just talking about one of the theories that we mentioned, this one. Maura's car collides with the back of Butch Atwood's bus going at a very low speed, and that's why it has that type of Preston look where the hood is raised up a little. And even if Butch had hit the brakes or something and Moore was going at a slow speed and she went under it, and then once again he's saying, you're not going to get any trouble, but I have to report this. And then the person who arrives on the scene put Moore into his car and did something to her and then just told Butch Atwood, this is what you're going to say. Is that really what happened? I don't know. It's all very theoretical. But once we put all of these pieces in line, that would mean that Butch Atwood was not the active participant in it. Or I think he would be an unknowing participant at best, or just turning a blind eye, see no, speak no, hear no. But when I say active participant, I mean very specifically putting foul play onto Maura, putting Maura in the situation of foul play and being a physical attacker. I'd be very curious to know what you have to say about either one of these theories. And we're just reading off that thing there that was written on Reddit. I mean, what really would be the motivation for Butch Atwood to hide Maura? I mean, like what that one is saying is that Maura Murray wants to hide for what? It's highly possible she was not drinking. And the whole podcast, 107 Degrees, explores that across all the episodes. It would take 35 minutes to just summarize all the reasons why they believe that she was not intoxicated on that night. But I would love to hear what anybody has to say about Maura Murray, timeline, theories, possibility, and I would just want to see your comments in the section below. Okay, that's all for me now. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. But most importantly, please put some comments in the section below so we can continue the discussion. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.